My brother lost his job and moved in with our parents, forcing me out of my room. He didn't look for a job and lived off them, while I paid $3,000 every month to support my father. My name is Jake. I'm 29, and I live with my parents. It's not exactly the life I pictured for myself, but it's where I am right now. A lot of people assume that living with your parents at my age means you're taking it easy, saving money, or just slacking off. But in my case, it couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the arrangement is anything but a free ride for me. I work full-time as a regional sales manager, and the job keeps me busy. A lot of it is travel. I'm usually on the road at least 2 or 3 times a month, heading out of town for meetings, conferences, or client visits. It's a decent job, and I'm grateful for it, but the travel can be draining. And even though I'm away a lot, I still make sure I'm there for my parents in every way I can. When I first moved back in with them, it was supposed to be temporary. I'd been living on my own in a small apartment downtown, but when my dad got sick, I knew I had to step up. He'd always been the provider, the one who made sure everything ran smoothly. But with his health taking a turn, my mom needed help, both financially and emotionally. So, I packed up my things, broke my lease, and moved back into my childhood home. At first, I thought I could just help out here and there, do the occasional grocery run, pay for a few of the bills. But soon enough, I realized that they needed more than that. My dad's medical bills were piling up, and my mom had stopped working to take care of him. They were on a fixed income, and it wasn't enough to cover everything. So I started chipping in more, paying for the groceries, covering the rent, even paying for some of the medication my dad needed. Every month, I'd hand over $3,000 to cover what they couldn't. It wasn't easy. There were times when I felt like I was drowning, like I was working nonstop just to keep us afloat, but I couldn't abandon them. They'd given me everything, and now it was my turn to be there for them, even if it meant putting my own life on hold. Despite my best efforts, there was tension. My parents were proud people, and accepting help wasn't easy for them. My dad, especially, struggled with the idea of me paying for everything. I knew he felt guilty, like he'd failed as a provider, and no matter how much I tried to reassure him, the guilt lingered. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I got home to find my mom sitting at the kitchen table, her face drawn and tired. "Hey, Mom," I said, setting my briefcase down. "Is everything okay?" She looked up, her eyes filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. "Jake, your father's had a rough day. He keeps talking about how he's a burden on you. I try to tell him that you're helping because you want to, but he doesn't want to listen." I felt a pang in my chest. I knew my dad's pride was wounded, but hearing it like this, knowing that he thought of himself as a burden, was painful. "Where is he?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "In the den," she replied, giving me a small, encouraging nod. "Maybe you could talk to him. He listens to you." I headed to the den, steeling myself for a difficult conversation. My dad was sitting in his old recliner, staring blankly at the TV, though it was clear his mind was elsewhere. "Hey, Dad," I said, taking a seat across from him. He looked up, his expression somber. "Jake, didn't know you were back. How was the trip?" "Exhausting, but nothing I can't handle," I replied, forcing a small smile. "Listen, Mom told me you're feeling a bit down." He let out a bitter chuckle. "Down doesn't even begin to cover it. Here I am, sitting around all day, doing nothing while my son works himself to the bone to pay my bills. How do you think that feels, Jake?" I could see the frustration, the pain in his eyes. My dad had always been a strong man, someone I looked up to, and seeing him like this, vulnerable, uncertain, was tough. "Dad, I'm helping because I want to. You and Mom did everything for me. You put me through school, helped me when I needed it. This is the least I can do." He shook his head, his hands clenching into fists. "It's not right, Jake. I should be the one taking care of you, not the other way around. What kind of father am I if I can't even provide for my own family?" His words cut deep, and I struggled to find a response. I wanted to tell him that he was still my hero, that he'd done more for me than he could ever know. But I knew that, to him, it wasn't about words, it was about actions. No matter what I said, he would still see himself as a burden, as someone who had failed. The days went on, and I kept up the routine, juggling work and family responsibilities as best as I could. But the pressure was starting to wear on me. I'd lie awake at night, thinking about the bills, about my dad's condition, about the weight of everything I was carrying. I felt like I was stuck in a cycle, with no way out. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I was on a business trip, sitting in a hotel room, exhausted after a long day of meetings, when my phone rang. It was my cousin Sarah, someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. "Hey, Jake," she said, her voice warm but hesitant. "I hope I'm not bothering you. I heard about what's been going on, and I wanted to check in." I was taken aback. Sarah and I had always been close growing up, but we drifted apart over the years. Hearing from her now, at a time when I felt so alone, was a strange comfort. "Hey, Sarah," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, things have been a bit rough." We talked for a while, catching up on each other's lives. She told me about her job, her family, and then, hesitantly, she brought up my situation. "Jake, I know this might be hard to hear, but have you thought about maybe finding a different way to help your parents? I mean, you're paying so much every month. Isn't there another way?" Her question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on supporting my parents financially that I hadn't considered other options. But the more we talked, the more I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was another way to help them without sacrificing my own life in the process. That conversation with Sarah planted a seed in my mind, a thought that I couldn't shake. I started researching options, looking into ways to manage my parents' expenses, maybe even downsize or find assistance programs that could ease the burden. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I wasn't sure how my parents would feel about it, but I knew I had to try. When I got home from the trip, I sat down with my parents, explaining my idea. At first, they were hesitant, especially my dad. But after a long discussion, they finally agreed to explore some options. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was a start, a small step toward a future where I didn't have to carry the weight of everything alone. As the days went on, things began to improve, bit by bit. We found ways to cut costs, to make things more manageable. And while the challenges were far from over, I started to feel a sense of relief, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to make this work. A few months after things started to stabilize, just as I was beginning to feel some relief, everything turned upside down again. My brother Alex had been struggling at his job for a while, a situation that wasn't exactly a surprise to anyone. He had a rough track record with employment, always seemed to be switching jobs, taking time off, or getting fired. And now, with a wife and 2 young kids to support, he was in a rough spot financially. One evening, I came home from work, tired and hoping for a quiet night, when I noticed my parents sitting together in the living room, looking worried. My mom saw me walk in and gestured for me to join them. "Jake," she began, her voice hesitant, "we need to talk to you about something." I took a seat, feeling a knot of unease forming in my stomach. Conversations that started this way usually didn't lead anywhere good. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. My dad shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "It's about Alex. You know he's been having trouble at work." I nodded, already seeing where this was headed. "Yeah, I know. Did something happen?" He lost his job," my mom said quietly. "And things are really tight for him and Lisa right now. They're struggling to make ends meet, and with 2 kids, they don't have many options." I sighed, feeling a familiar mix of frustration and helplessness. "So, what are you saying?" My mom hesitated, glancing at my dad before looking back at me. "We told Alex and Lisa they could stay here, just for a little while, until he gets back on his feet." I blinked, feeling a surge of irritation. "Stay here? As in, move in with us?" "Yes," my dad said, still not meeting my eyes. "We don't want to see them out on the street, Jake. And you know they don't have any other family nearby. It's just temporary, until Alex finds another job." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where exactly are they going to stay? We barely have enough room as it is." There was a tense pause, and I could see the discomfort in their expressions before my mom finally spoke up. "Well, we thought maybe they could take your room. It's the biggest one, and with the kids, they'll need the space. You can take the smaller room downstairs." It's just for a little while. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. You're giving them my room? The room I've been paying for? The room I've been helping to support with $3,000 a month? Jake, my mom said softly, reaching out as if to touch my arm. It's not about money. Alex is your brother. He needs our help. Can't you just do this for a little while? We thought you'd understand. Understand. The word echoed in my mind, filling me with a mixture of frustration and resentment. I had uprooted my life to help them, sacrificed my own freedom and financial security to make sure they were taken care of, and now they were asking me to give up my space, my comfort, because Alex had yet again messed up his own life. When exactly is this happening? I asked, my voice tight. They're coming this weekend, my dad said, finally meeting my gaze. We didn't want to spring it on you, but, well, they really don't have anywhere else to go. I sat there, feeling a heavy weight settle on my chest. It felt like a betrayal, as though everything I'd done for them had been overlooked, dismissed as something expected rather than appreciated. But I could see that their minds were already made up. This was happening, whether I liked it or not. That weekend, Alex and his family arrived, hauling in suitcases, toys, and boxes of clothes. I stood off to the side, watching as they moved into my room, making themselves at home while I was relegated to the tiny space downstairs. It was more of a storage room than a bedroom, small, cramped, with barely enough room for a twin bed and a dresser. I'd spent my entire life working hard, building a career, and now I was being pushed aside, forced into a corner because my brother couldn't keep a job. It didn't take long for the tension to build. Alex acted as though he was doing me a favor by moving in, barely acknowledging the sacrifices I'd made to keep our parents afloat. Lisa, his wife, was polite enough, but I could see the way she looked at me, like she was judging me for living with our parents at my age, even though she had no idea how much I was actually contributing. The kids, bless them, were a handful. They were young. One was 3, the other just barely a year old. And they were constantly running around, yelling, making noise at all hours. My once quiet home had turned into a chaotic mess, and there was nowhere I could go to escape it. One night, after a long day at work, I came home to find my parents, Alex, and Lisa all sitting around the dinner table, laughing and talking like one big happy family. I could feel the resentment bubbling up inside me, a bitterness that had been growing ever since they'd moved in. Hey, Jake, Alex called out, grinning at me as if nothing was wrong. You're just in time for dinner. Mom made your favorite, lasagna. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the fact that I'd just spent 12 hours working to support a household that barely seemed to appreciate my efforts. Great, I muttered, pulling out a chair and sitting down. As we ate, the conversation turned to Alex's job hunt, or rather, his lack of progress. He shrugged, acting nonchalant as he explained that he was taking some time to figure things out, to find something that really fits. Must be nice, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Alex looked at me, raising an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? I set down my fork, meeting his gaze with a look that I hoped conveyed just how fed up I was. I mean, it must be nice to just take your time, to figure things out while you're living rent-free in someone else's house. There was a tense silence, and I could see the anger flaring in Alex's eyes. I didn't ask for your charity, Jake. We're family. Families help each other out. Yeah, I know all about helping out, I snapped, unable to hold back any longer. I've been helping out for years, paying the bills, covering expenses. And now, I'm the one getting pushed aside, all so you can have a free ride. Jake, my mom said, her voice low and pleading. Please, let's not do this. But I was too far gone to stop. All the frustration, all the resentment that had been building up finally spilled over. No, Mom. I'm done pretending everything's fine. I moved back in to help you and Dad, to make sure you were taken care of. And now you're treating me like I don't even matter, like my contributions don't count. You're giving away my space, my room, and expecting me to just smile and nod. Alex rolled his eyes, looking annoyed. Oh, come on, Jake. You're acting like a martyr. Nobody forced you to move back in. You chose to help out, and now you're acting like we all owe you something. My jaw tightened, and I stood up, unable to take any more. Maybe I am acting like a martyr, but that's because I've been carrying this family on my back for years, and I'm tired of being treated like an afterthought. With that, I turned and walked away, heading down to my cramped, makeshift room, slamming the door behind me. The walls felt like they were closing in, a constant reminder of how much I'd sacrificed, how little it seemed to matter to the people around me. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house was tense. My parents tried to smooth things over, acting as though nothing had happened, but I could see the hurt in their eyes. They didn't understand why I was so angry, why I felt so betrayed. And Alex continued to act as though he was entitled to everything, oblivious to the toll his presence was taking on me. I began to dread coming home, the thought of facing my family filling me with a sense of bitterness and resentment. I was stuck, trapped in a situation that felt increasingly impossible to bear, and no matter how much I tried to explain my feelings, it seemed like no one was willing to listen. After months of feeling trapped in my own home, of navigating the constant tension with my family, I finally hit a breaking point. I'd been paying $3,000 a month just to keep everyone else afloat, but now that I was stuck in a cramped, makeshift room while Alex and his family took over my space, the situation had become unbearable. The thought of shelling out more of my hard-earned money just to be treated like I was invisible was more than I could stand. I decided it was time for a break, a real one. I needed to get away, to clear my head and figure out what I wanted. I had a couple of weeks of vacation saved up, and for the first time in years, I was going to use it for myself. No more family obligations, no more bending over backward for everyone else. Just me, finally putting my own needs first. The idea started small. I'd planned to book a regular hotel room somewhere quiet, somewhere far from the chaos of home. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't just want a hotel. I wanted somewhere I could actually relax, somewhere I could breathe. After doing some research, I came across a resort about 2 hours away that was offering discounted rates for long-term stays. If I stayed there for a couple of weeks, it would actually be cheaper than paying rent at home, and I wouldn't have to listen to my family's arguments or feel the resentment building every time I saw Alex lounging around the house. I booked the room and packed my bags that same night, not even bothering to tell anyone where I was going. My parents would assume I was on a work trip, and honestly, I was tired of explaining myself. They wouldn't understand anyway. The drive to the resort felt surreal, like I was finally breaking free from a prison I hadn't realized I'd been living in. As I pulled up to the resort, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The place was beautiful. Palm trees lined the driveway, and the lobby was open and airy, filled with natural light. It was everything my family's cramped house wasn't, and I knew right away that I'd made the right decision. When I checked in, the receptionist, a friendly woman named Kara, handed me my room key with a warm smile. "Welcome, Mr. Hayes," she said, glancing at my reservation. "I see you'll be staying with us for a couple of weeks. I hope you enjoy your stay." "Thanks, Kara," I replied, trying not to sound too relieved. "I'm really looking forward to it." The room itself was even better than I'd expected. It was spacious, with a large bed, a private balcony overlooking the pool, and a small kitchenette. The decor was simple yet elegant, and for the first time in ages, I felt like I could actually relax. I unpacked my things, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat on the balcony, taking in the view. The air was warm and fresh, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The days that followed were a revelation. I spent my mornings lounging by the pool, my afternoons exploring the nearby trails, and my evenings enjoying quiet dinners in the resort's restaurant. I didn't have to worry about anyone else's needs, didn't have to tiptoe around my family, or pretend to be okay with the situation at home. For the first time in years, my time was my own. One evening, while I was having dinner in the resort's lounge, I struck up a conversation with another guest, a man named Daniel who looked to be around my age. He was sitting at the bar, nursing a glass of whiskey, and when he noticed me looking his way, he gave me a friendly nod. "Long day?" he asked, raising his glass in a casual salute. I laughed, feeling more relaxed than I had in ages. "You could say that." "Just trying to unwind," Daniel chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. "Aren't we all? I'm here to get away from work stress. How about you?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share, but something about Daniel's easygoing demeanor put me at ease. "Family stress, actually." Just needed a break. He nodded, giving me a sympathetic look. I get it. Sometimes a change of scenery is all you need. We spent the rest of the evening talking, sharing stories about work, family, and life. I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't expected, telling him about the situation at home, about how I'd been supporting my parents, how my brother had moved in and taken over my space. Daniel listened, nodding thoughtfully, occasionally chiming in with his own experiences. At the end of the night, he clapped me on the shoulder, giving me an encouraging smile. Look, man, you've been through a lot. Don't let anyone make you feel like you owe them more than you've already given. Take this time to think about what you really want, not what everyone else expects of you. His words stuck with me, and as I headed back to my room, I found myself thinking about what he'd said. For so long, I'd put everyone else's needs above my own, bending over backward to keep my family happy, sacrificing my own comfort and financial stability. But maybe it was time to put myself first, to set boundaries and stop letting others dictate my life. The next few days were a blur of relaxation and reflection. I went for long walks along the beach, took naps in the afternoon, and even treated myself to a massage at the resort spa. Each day, I felt a little more like myself, a little less weighed down by the responsibilities I'd been carrying for so long. One afternoon, as I was sitting by the pool with a book, I saw Kara, the receptionist who had checked me in, walking by. She smiled when she saw me and came over, her expression warm and friendly. "Enjoying your stay?" she asked, taking a seat beside me. "More than you know," I replied, setting my book aside. "This place has been exactly what I needed." She nodded, glancing out at the pool. "It's amazing what a little time away can do. Sometimes, a change of scenery is all it takes to see things more clearly." We talked for a while, and I found myself opening up to her in the same way I had with Daniel. There was something about the people here, their openness, their willingness to listen, that made me feel safe, like I could finally let my guard down. As the end of my stay approached, I began to feel a sense of dread creeping in. The thought of going back to my parents' house, of returning to the cramped room and the constant tension, filled me with a sense of heaviness that I couldn't shake. I didn't want to go back to that life, didn't want to continue sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of everyone else. One evening, as I was packing my bags, I sat down on the balcony, staring out at the sunset. The thought hit me like a bolt of lightning. I didn't have to go back. I didn't have to keep living a life that wasn't mine. Didn't have to keep sacrificing my own well-being for the sake of others. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'd spent so long feeling trapped, feeling like I had no other options, but now, for the first time, I saw a way out. I could find my own place, start fresh, build a life that was truly mine. The next morning, I checked out of the resort, feeling a mixture of sadness and excitement. Kara was at the front desk, and when she saw me, she gave me a warm smile. "Heading home?" she asked, handing me my final receipt. I paused, feeling a surge of determination. "Actually, I think I'm heading toward a new beginning." She looked at me, her smile widening. "Well, wherever you end up, I hope you find what you're looking for." As I walked out of the resort, I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't experienced in years. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, but I knew that, for the first time, I was finally in control of my own life. Moving out of my parents' house felt like a long overdue breath of fresh air. I finally had my own space, my own life, and a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I found a small, affordable apartment near my office, nothing fancy but enough to call my own. I'd finally drawn a line, and I was determined to start living life on my terms. But my family had other plans. A couple of weeks after I settled into my new place, my phone rang one evening. It was my mom. Normally, I'd be happy to hear from her, but ever since I'd moved out, I'd noticed that every conversation somehow circled back to money. "Jake, honey, how's the new apartment?" she asked, her voice cheerful, though with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. "It's good, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone light. "I'm really happy here." There was a pause, and I could practically hear her shifting uncomfortably. "Well, that's good, sweetie. Listen, I hate to bring this up, but things have been a little tight around here since you left." I felt my chest tighten. I'd barely been out of the house for a few weeks, and already, here it was, another request for money. Oh, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. What's going on? It's just that with Alex and the kids here, expenses have gone up. Groceries, utilities, you know how it is. Your dad and I are doing our best, but we could really use a little help, just until things settle down. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. Mom, I'm not living there anymore. I'm already paying my own rent, utilities, everything. I can't keep covering your expenses on top of that. There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. I understand, Jake, she said finally, her tone subdued. But we're family, and family helps each other out. I know that, Mom, I replied, struggling to keep the irritation out of my voice. But I've been helping for years. I need to start focusing on my own life. She sighed, and I could hear the disappointment in her voice. All right, Jake. I just thought you'd understand. The call ended, but the unease lingered. I'd worked so hard to establish boundaries, to carve out a life for myself, but it felt like my family refused to let go, like they expected me to continue sacrificing my own needs for theirs. I told myself that they'd get used to it eventually, that they'd figure things out on their own, but I was wrong. A week later, I got another call, this time from Alex. I hadn't heard from him since I'd moved out, and part of me hoped he was finally taking responsibility for his own life. But as soon as I answered, I knew I was in for more of the same. Jake, hey man, he started, his tone casual. How's the new place? It's good, Alex. What's up? Well, you know, things have been a little rough around here since you left, he said, and I could tell he was trying to sound nonchalant. Money's been tight, and with the kids and all, it's been a struggle. I bit back a sigh, knowing exactly where this was going. What do you need, Alex? He hesitated, then launched into a list of expenses that sounded more like a shopping spree than essentials. The kids need new clothes, and Lisa wants to get them into some after-school programs. Plus, the car's been acting up, and we don't have the funds for repairs. I felt my patience slipping. Alex, I'm not living there anymore. I'm already covering my own expenses. I can't keep paying for yours too. His tone shifted, growing defensive. Come on, Jake. You know I'm trying to get back on my feet. I just need a little help until I find a steady job. What's a few $100 here and there? A few $100? I repeated, incredulous. Alex, I've been paying thousands every month for years. And now that I finally moved out, you expect me to keep doing it? We're family, Jake, he replied, his tone hardening. Isn't that what family does? There it was again, the same refrain I'd heard from my mom, the same expectation that I'd keep sacrificing my own well-being for theirs. But this time, I couldn't let it slide. Family helps each other out, I said, my voice tight. But that doesn't mean I have to keep bailing you out because you can't hold down a job. I have my own life, my own bills. I can't keep putting myself in a hole to fix your mistakes. The line went silent, and for a moment, I thought he'd hung up. But then he spoke, his tone cold and cutting. You know what, Jake? Maybe you've changed. Ever since you moved out, you've been acting like you're better than us, like you don't owe us anything. But you wouldn't be where you are without this family. Don't forget that. Anger surged through me, and I struggled to keep my voice steady. I haven't forgotten, Alex. But I'm done letting you guilt me into paying for everything. I'm done letting you and Mom and Dad make me feel like I owe you my life. He scoffed, his tone dripping with resentment. Fine, Jake. Be selfish. But don't come crawling back when you need us. He hung up, leaving me sitting there, fuming. The conversation replayed in my mind, each word a reminder of just how deeply ingrained their expectations were, how they saw my success as something they were entitled to, rather than something I'd earned through hard work and sacrifice. Over the next few days, I tried to move on, to focus on my work and my life, but the tension with my family hung over me like a dark cloud. My mom called several times, each time hinting at the financial struggles they were facing, each time subtly trying to guilt me into giving in. But I held my ground, refusing to let them pull me back into the same cycle. Then, one evening, just as I was starting to think things might finally settle down, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Alex standing there, looking irritated and a little desperate. "What are you doing here?" I asked, taken aback. He pushed past me, walking into my apartment without an invitation. "We need to talk, Jake." I closed the door, feeling a sense of dread settling in. "What do you want, Alex?" He turned to face me, his expression a mix of frustration and entitlement. "Look, Jake, I don't know what's gotten into you, but we're family. We've always looked out for each other, and now, when I need you the most, you're just abandoning us?" "Abandoning you?" I repeated, disbelief coloring my tone. "Alex, I've been supporting you, Mom, and Dad for years. I've given up my own life, my own dreams, to make sure you were all taken care of. And now that I've finally started focusing on myself, you're acting like I'm some kind of villain." He crossed his arms, his jaw clenched. "It's not about the money, Jake. It's about loyalty. You're turning your back on us when we need you." I shook my head, feeling a surge of anger. "No, Alex. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. I'm tired of being your safety net, of being the one everyone leans on without a second thought. It's time you start taking responsibility for your own life." He glared at me, his face red with anger. "Fine, Jake. If that's how you want it, don't expect us to be there for you when things go south." I didn't respond, too angry and exhausted to argue. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, leaving me standing there, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. I knew that my decision to stand my ground would come at a cost, but for the first time, I felt a sense of peace, a sense that I was finally putting myself first, even if it meant losing the support of my family. Refusing to continue supporting Alex financially was one of the hardest things I'd done. I knew it wouldn't sit well with my parents, but I'd had enough. I'd spent years being their safety net, and now that I was finally setting boundaries, I knew there'd be backlash. What I didn't expect was how relentless it would be. At first, it was just my parents calling me, leaving messages laced with disappointment and guilt. My mom's voice would waver as she reminded me of all they'd sacrificed for me over the years, the usual guilt trip disguised as concern. Then my dad would leave a message, his voice cold and heavy, saying he was disappointed in me, that I'd turned my back on my own blood. It was hurtful, but I'd prepared myself for it. But soon, the calls and messages started coming from other family members. Relatives I barely spoke to on a regular basis were suddenly all over me. My Aunt Marilyn called one morning, her voice sharp and accusing. "Jake, I just don't understand what's gotten into you," she said, not even bothering with a greeting. "Alex is your brother. He's struggling, and you're just going to leave him hanging?" I took a deep breath, reminding myself that Aunt Marilyn hadn't been there through the years of me paying thousands each month, sacrificing my own stability. "Marilyn, I've been helping him for years. I'm finally taking care of myself, and I can't keep giving him money. I have my own life to think about." She scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "Your own life? You think you'd have this life if it weren't for your family? You're where you are because of them, Jake. Don't forget that." I felt the familiar wave of anger rise, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I'm not forgetting anything, Marilyn. But helping him doesn't mean destroying myself in the process. Selfishness isn't a good look on you, Jake," she said coldly before hanging up. And it didn't stop with Aunt Marilyn. Over the next few days, I received calls from cousins, distant aunts and uncles, even family friends who'd somehow been roped into the whole thing. Each one of them tried to guilt-trip me, accusing me of betraying my family, saying that I was abandoning the people who needed me most. But things took an even uglier turn when my parents took their tactics to a whole new level. One evening, as I was getting ready to go out with a few friends, I received a text from my friend Dave. "Hey Jake, got a weird call from your mom. Everything okay?" My stomach sank. My parents had never involved my friends before, and I had a bad feeling about this. I called Dave immediately, anxiety gnawing at me. "Hey man, what did she say?" Dave sounded hesitant, clearly uncomfortable. She was talking about how you've abandoned the family, how you've changed. She told me she was worried about you, that you've been unstable lately." Jake, it didn't sound like she was just checking in. I clenched my jaw, feeling a mix of anger and humiliation. "I can't believe this," I muttered. "She's trying to make me look bad to force me back." Dave was quiet for a moment. Look, I don't know what's going on with your family, but I know you. You're one of the most responsible guys I know. Don't let them mess with your head. I thanked him, feeling grateful for his support, but the relief was short-lived. A few days later, my manager called me into her office, her expression serious. Jake, I wanted to check in with you about something, she began, her tone cautious. I received a call from a woman claiming to be your mother. She expressed concern about your stability and suggested that you might be struggling. I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. My parents were contacting my employer now? This was a new low. Look, I don't know what she told you, but there's nothing wrong with me. My family, they're upset because I've set boundaries. I apologize that they dragged you into this. My manager nodded, her expression sympathetic. I understand, Jake. I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt. Family can be complicated. I left her office feeling humiliated and furious. My parents had crossed a line, and I knew that I couldn't keep going like this. They dragged my friends, my boss, and half the family into something that was none of their business, all to guilt me into submission. Over the next few days, I thought long and hard about my options. I could continue enduring the constant pressure and guilt, or I could do something drastic, something that might finally give me the peace I'd been searching for. I knew what I had to do, but the thought was both terrifying and liberating. I made the decision to move to another state, a clean slate, far away from the constant pressure and demands. It wasn't an easy choice. Part of me still clung to the hope that my family would understand, that they'd accept my boundaries. But I knew, deep down, that they wouldn't change. They'd continue to see me as a source of support, a means to an end. Once I found an apartment in a city a few states away, I started making arrangements. I sold some of my things, packed up my belongings, and prepared to say goodbye to the life I'd built here. It was painful, knowing that I was leaving behind not only my family but the friends I'd made, the connections I'd built, but I also felt a sense of relief, a weight lifting off my shoulders as I prepared to start fresh. The day I left, I sent a message to my parents explaining my decision. I didn't expect them to understand, but I wanted to make it clear.